In this video, we're going to be going over trigonometry, the basics. So say we have a right angled triangle with two sides 4 and 3 and one unknown angle theta. Now the first thing we need to do is find the hypotenuse. Now to do that we can just simply use the Pythagorean theorem, and that's going to be a squared plus b squared equals c squared. That's 3 squared plus 4 squared, and 3 squared is 9 plus 16 equals c squared, and 25 equals c squared. So if we're gonna root both sides to find c, we'll get c equals 5. So our hypotenuse is gonna be 5. Now before we find or move on to sine cos tan, let's name our triangle sides. So 3 is the side opposite to our angle, so this is going to be our opposite side. 4 is adjacent to the angle theta, so that's going to be our adjacent side. And 5, as we know, is our hypotenuse because it's opposite to our right angle. Now, let's move on to finding the sine value of the angle theta. So to find sine, it's opposite over hypotenuse. So the opposite value is 3. The length of the hypotenuse is 5. Therefore, sine theta is equal to 3 by 5. In the same way, we can find cos theta by using adjacent side over hypotenuse. Now our adjacent side is 4 and our hypotenuse is 5. So cos theta is 4 by 5. Like that. Finally, we can move on to tan theta. Now tan theta is opposite over adjacent. Now our opposite sides 3 again, our adjacent sides 4. Therefore, tan theta is 3 by 4. Okay, so since we have the basics down, now we can move on to the complex stuff. Now the first thing we have is the sine rule. Now before we get into the sine rule, we need to label our triangle in a way that the angles and the sides correspond. So let's pick an angle first. Say I choose this angle. Now this angle corresponds to the side opposite to it, which is this side. So if I'm going to name this side capital A, I'm going to name this angle simple A. Now let's move on to this angle. Now this angle is going to correspond to the side opposite to it, which is this, and I'm going to name this capital B. That means this is going to be simple B. Now this angle is going to correspond to the side opposite to it, which is this, so I'm going to name it capital C, and this is going to be simple C. Now the sine rule equation is going to give us sine A over A equals sine B over B equals sine C over C. That's it. And for any question you get, you don't have to use all 3 sides and all 3 angles. If you just want to find sine B and you have sine A with side A, you can just use this part as well. It's up to the question. Okay, so for this question, our goal is to find x. Now, obviously, we're going to use the sine rule. So the sine rule is something like this. Sine A over A equals sine B over B equals sine C over C. Now, we have 2 sides, so we're just going to need sine A and sine B. So let's find the angles that correspond to its opposite sides. So that means this is going to correspond with this, and this is going to correspond with this. So likewise, we're going to get sine 30 over 5 equals sine 45 over x. To rearrange this question to make x the subject, we're going to get x equals 5 times sine 45 degrees divided by sine 30 degrees. keep in mind when the question's given something in radians, use radians, and when it's in degrees like this one, use degrees. Now I'm not going to simplify the signs and find x, but you get the gist. You can use your trigonometric the values or your calculator for this. And that's it for the sine rule. So moving on, we have the cosine rule. Now the cosine rule looks something like this. A squared equals b squared plus c squared minus 2bc cos a. Now notice that it looks similar to the Pythagorean theorem. Well, that's because you use the cosine rule to find the length of an unknown side. But we can't use the Pythagorean theorem because we don't have a right angle in this triangle. So whenever you want to find the length of an unknown side of a triangle without a right angle, you use the cosine rule. But there's a few rules that you have to follow. Now, in this equation, or in the base equation, you find the length of A. A's are unknown. And for that you use C and B. Now if you're using B and C, you need to use the included angle, which is the angle between the two sides B and C. Now that's A. That's why for the cos you use cos with a simple A. Now say for example you need to find the length of the side B. Now if that's the case, then you'll have to rewrite your equation like this. It's going to be b squared equals a squared plus c squared minus 2ac times cos b. Now I used cos b because I'm using side A and side C, so the included angle between side A and C is b. Now say for a question you get something like this. You have one unknown side x, and you know the lengths of two sides, which is one is 5 and the other is 6, and now you have two angles. You have 45 degrees and 30 degrees. Now I'm going to write the cosine rule over here, which is a squared equals b squared plus c squared minus 2bc cos a. Now remember, you need to use an included angle. Now let's rewrite our equation or a formula to match this question. So we're going to get x squared equals 5 squared plus 6 squared minus 2 times 5 times 6 times cos 45 degrees. Now to further simplify this, we're gonna get x squared equals 25 plus 36 minus 2 times 5 times 6 is 60 minus 60 times cos 45 degrees. Now I'm taking 45 degrees without taking 30 degrees because the two sides that I'm using is 5 and 6, and the included angle between 5 and 6 is 45 degrees. Now moving on to finding the area of a triangle. Now to find the area of a triangle in an obscure case, we have the formula half times A times B times sine C. Now like the cosine rule, we use an included angle in this case as well because the two sides we use are A and B, and the angle between the sides A and B is C. Now say for example we decide to use the sides A and C. Now we're going to start with half times A times C times sine B, because the angle B is the angle between the two sides A and C, and that's the included angle. Now that's all for the formula for the area of a triangle. Now let's move on to a question. The same case, we have one unknown length and we're not going to be needing that, so let's ignore that. But we have two known lengths, 5 and 6, two angles, 45 and 30, and now we need to find the area of this triangle. Now on the top I'm going to write the equation for our area, and so we have 5 and 6. So to do that, we're going to use half times 5 times 6 times sine 45 degrees, because 45 degrees is the angle between the two sides 5 and 6. Now that's our included angle. Now to simplify this, excuse me, 5 times 6 is 30, so half times 30 is 15, and our area is equal to 15 times sine 45 degrees. Now you can simplify this using your trigonometric values or your calculator, so I'm going to leave it like this. And that's all there is to it for the basics of trigonometry. We'll move on to some complicated trigonometry using some identities in the next video. But till then, practice these, use your textbooks, use your resources, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.